there. Welcome. Would you like to introduce yourself to me?
I'd be happy to. Hi, my name is Tome. So I'm a software development manager here at AWS Glue, working on putting sort of data management functionality into AWS Glue itself.
Lovely.
Yeah. And then for those who aren't familiar with AWS Glue, how would you describe it to someone?
Yeah, no problem. It's a serverless data integration platform. So you can think, a lot of like ETL, joining things, landing stuff into your data lakes, getting it from multiple sources, merging it together, and then just kind of making it available in data lakes is kind of what the Glue provides today.
And what type of customers would tend to use Glue?
Glue it's basically it's funny is there's actually multiple types of customers for Glue. There's the classic data engineers who like to have a lot of control and like to manage their pipelines, and so we have tools available for them. We also have a very simplified sort of catalog experience. A lot of our customers sometimes come just by using Athena, right? You have to register with Glue Data Catalog. You make your catalog, your data sort of available within the catalog, and then you can do queries from within it. So it's kind of a mixed bag in terms of who uses it.
Gotcha. So what is it that we're chatting about today?
Yeah, we're really excited. So our team has been working for quite a while now on a feature called AWS Data Quality. And so this is really about providing sort of the tools and functionality that you're going to need to be able to do scans of your data and determine whether or not it's good or not. And Glue is a great place for that, right? Because whether you are that sort of casual user who's the catalog user who just has a bunch of data and just wants to know if it's good, and you're more of like a data steward type persona, it works for you. And then if you are more of the data engineer and you want the fine-grained control and you want all of that, since we're already sucking in data and merging it and in the effort of landing it wherever you want to land it, that's a great place to do these types of scans, because if you have a problem, it's usually from the upstream data sources or for wherever you're getting the data. And so you may want to address it before it lands in your data lake, and then suddenly you have a data swamp instead of a data lake, right?
Data swamp, I love that.
Yeah. And then what happens? So it scans your data, and then if it detects something, what happens then?
Yeah, so it's really flexible in terms of, it can either simply audit, right? At which point an operator can come along, say, okay, there's bad data here. I need to, investigate and kind of figure out what's going on. You can automate the entire thing. You can, with the release that we came out with this week for our GA announcement, we've introduced the ability to do row level results. So you'll be able to like quarantine good data versus bad data. You can take that type of action. You can fail your ETL job, so you can prevent further processing. You could decide to continue processing, right? So it's a really, really flexible tool. But the most important thing is that you will get the results back. You'll see what happened, why it happened, and then be able to take action. Additionally, you can also trigger it all together. We have Event Bridge, we have CloudWatch, and so you can sort of, based off of whatever comes out of it, be able to trigger additional things to sort of further automate it, make it less of a hands-on operation.
Gotcha. So what's the main difference between like the GA for AWS Glue and this particular launch?
You mean for the preview, you mean, or for the like what's different between what we just launched today this week versus what we launched about 6 months ago as a preview?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Just want to make sure it was, because so basically the story is we have quite a number of functionality that we've introduced here. So the row level results, like I mentioned, being able to understand where in the data your problem is happening, like exactly what row, so that you can fix it for data that makes sense. Certain things like a row count needs to be greater than 1. Obviously there's no one row that causes that problem if you're over that number. So, but for the ones that do have, an actual data set that is causing the problem, you can see that.
Yeah.
In addition to that, we have a support for, in the catalog experience, support for Redshift, Hudi, Iceberg, Delta Lake. We have the Event Bridge integrations. And one of the other biggest ones is we have the ability to use multiple data sources in your data quality rules. So think of like, we call them referential integrity checks. It's basically, hey, I want to use a reference table. My data has a state and a zip code, and I want to make sure that that's a valid state and zip code combination against a reference table. And so we now support that within the product.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's really cool. And I love the call outs that you made, especially the one that stands out to me is about how you can stop the job if there's like bad quality data. I think, I mean, I'm a solutions architect and I hear from customers all the time. They're thinking about how to balance performance and their costs and really making that their ETL jobs as cost optimized. So I think that's really cool what you've done is now that they don't necessarily have to run the entire job if there's no need to, because there's the data is not where it needs to be. Kamal seems to agree, I guess from on LinkedIn. And I also want to add for the people who are joining, I know we have some people I see in the chat who it sounds like they just joined us, like Tatiana. So hello, we're talking about Glue Data Quality. And the reason why we do this live is because we want to answer and address your questions about Glue Data Quality. So if you've got questions for Tomei, just pop them in the chat. Jordan and I are going to be here looking at the chat, and we're going to address them to Tomei here, expert on Glue.
Absolutely. So, I am curious to kind of see this in action, Tomei, how it works, how you can create these jobs to scan your data and how it kind of works. So let's
Yeah,
Demo.
to show it. Demo.
we should have like a theme song for demo.
I think we do need a demo
really
theme song.
Demo
Yeah.
dance. All right. So is it visible? Oh, there we go. Perfect.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah. So as I mentioned, so this is the Glue landing page. As I mentioned, there's a number. There's two primary ways that people may use this feature. There's the catalog as well as through the ETL job. So I'll start with the catalog. When you come here, this is where again, the data steward type persona, somebody who's managing all the data that's available within the environment. Over here, I have a set of trip data. So this is the equivalent of like a taxi service. You can see the schema down here that has like how the distance was traveled, what was the tip amount, that type of data. This is what has existed to today, and then we have just introduced this new tab called Data Quality. And when you come here for the first time, this is actually expanded. So you'll see how to get started, give you some basic information. And then what we do is you can also get if in this case, I've actually run this about 5 times recently. So you can see the past results and get a sort of a trend of how my data is performing in terms of its quality, as well as the results. But before we do that, the first thing you'll want to do is actually create a data quality rule. Now, in this case, I've already done one, but they're called recommendations. The first time you do it, it actually pops up a window that looks kind of like this. And you can recommend, you can basically set up this recommendation, run it. And what that does is it provides you a starting point. So if I hit insert rule recommendations, this was a recommendation that came back already. So it takes about 5 minutes to run. So for the purpose of this demo, I'm just going to whiz bang, show you, wave my hand, and boom, here it is. So I have previous recommendations that have run. And here you can see a set of what looks like data quality rules. First and foremost, this is a new language we invented called DQDL, which is called Data Quality Definition Language. And as you can see, it's very expressive. It's kind of self-explanatory. It's very easy to read if you understand your data even just a tiny bit. And what we do is we look statistically at your entire data set and say, okay, maybe these are not, let's say, recommendations that we think are great rules for you to have for data quality, but this is at least a starting point. We've heard from a lot of customers that they want to sit down and they want to create these rules for their data, but they don't even know where to start. And so this really cuts down the time in terms of exploring your data, figuring out what rules make sense and what don't. So for example, I can insert, let's say my vendor ID is less than 7. In this case, completeness passenger count means that 97% of that passenger count column will be complete. And then I could even do things like, right now I've got my passenger count is 9, less than or equal to 9. Let's say I want to tweak that. I want to change that to 10 because I know my cars can hold 10 and that's not really the valid rule that I care about. I can come here, add my selected rules. Oh, sorry, I put them in the wrong place. So I add my selected rules here and I can come here, like I said, and you can sort of tweak this. This is our DQDL code editor, so it actually has autocomplete, and you can enter information directly in there. But it also has this handy little rules finder. There's about 18 rules, and they're all documented here. They give you some examples. So let's say is complete gives you a little bit that tells you what it does. It gives you an example usage. I can insert that directly in. I also, right now, it's got column A there. I can browse my data. I can, from the schema detector, I can come here and I can say, okay, I want this, DOE location ID to be complete. So this is an example of how we sort of craft this. Once you craft it, I'm actually going to go back since I already have one of these created. I'm going to come here and you can see this one right here that we've created and we've run a few times. Let me just edit that so you can see what that looks like. So in this case, we're doing column values. We're saying that the vendor ID is less than 6. So this is really self-explanatory. But the one thing that's also really interesting is that if we don't meet the rules that you have, like all of the types of things that you're looking for, we have this ability to do custom SQL so that you can say, all right, in this particular case, we should never see a passenger count that is 0 and a fare amount. So we should never have charged anybody if there was nobody in the car, as an example. And so we run this query and we say, okay, there should be none of them. And in this case, this is actually going to fail when we run it. And so I can show you a little bit of how an operator may look at the results of this and then decide, what to do with it. So let's say we take this and we run this, and you get back some information about it. So you can see what succeeded, what failed. I have some actions. I can download a report from it. I can look and see what exactly is happening. This is actually a new feature too. Under evaluated metrics, we now show you exactly why it didn't pass. Right. This was actually a big request from our preview, because here we are evaluating this. And so, for example, like row count greater than 1, or if it was like, let's say it was less than 1,000 and it didn't meet, the first thing an operator does is they need to find out what is the actual value. And so now you go back and you have to run a new query. So we're now passing that information back to you. So you can see in this case, what the actual value was. And then if you come down here to the one that actually failed, we can see that, okay, it was this particular rule. It failed. Why did it fail? It didn't satisfy the threshold. What was actually returned back? Oh, 52,001. That wasn't one. And we can validate this. So like if I query this data right now, you can see that this was the actual query we had in the custom SQL, but you will see that there's 52,001 records that match that criteria. So there's passenger count is 0, but there is a fare. So that's an example of the sort of catalog experience. I'll pause there for a second, just make sure you guys don't have any questions, but otherwise I'll show you the next phase, which is the ETL experience.
Yeah, this is looking great so far. I think we actually have a question from the chat.
Yeah, I mean, perfect timing. So yeah, is there any way that only the good data is moved to the data lake? Great question, Vinod.
Yeah, so in that case, what you want is the more granular control. So again, this is more about the low touch experience, right? We're going to improve this over time. It's going to get so that you have less involvement in it, and you'll be able to get a bunch of that type of more granular functionality with time. Right now, all you can really do is, not all you can do, but you can scan it, you can schedule it. That's the kind of thing you can do today. But the next part of the demo actually shows you exactly that. So let me actually, hold on, let me start this over.
I've got one quick question that comes to mind. So for all the folks who are here who are new, have either a new project or maybe you're a new startup, and so you just have this data, and a lot of times, well, at least when I hear from the startups that I work with, is they don't necessarily know that much about the data yet. So if they're using Glue Data Quality and they've got these recommendations, how do they know which one to use?
Yeah, so right now today, we are thinking about that problem quite heavily. So I can't go into too many details on that. But what I can say is that today, with the recommendations alone, right, that seems to satisfy like the majority of customers that have that problem, where they can look at the schema, they can understand what it is, they can evaluate what the statistics are telling them, and then they can make judgment calls on their own, right? At some point, you do need to have a little bit of awareness of like what your data is and what you actually care about. But with time, yeah, hopefully we can get better at helping our customers do that more autonomously.
Really cool.
Yeah. So I have up here, this is if you've never seen it, this is our ETL authoring experience. This is called Glue Studio. So this is where you sort of craft together a Glue script visually. So in this case right here, I'm going to take an S3 source, and I'll show you just like how these are crafted. In this case, I'm not using something that's already been in the catalog, so I'm just going to go to an S3 bucket. So I have this one right here, Studio, and I've got my data lake files, and in here is some raw data. There's a customer CSV file, so I'm just going to choose that. I'm going to infer the schema. And you can see that now the schema is here. So we see what is in this data. So it's just like some customer type records. And then what I can do is, now that I have this data, I can insert a new data quality, evaluate data quality, at which point it brings me, so it connects it to the source, and it brings me to this new experience. It looks very familiar to what we just showed, which is the authoring experience. The new thing that we did add, as I mentioned before, is the ability to have multiple data sources. So you would actually be able to add a second source to this, and then do those referential integrity checks, alias them, give them proper names. As I mentioned, let me just expand this out so it's a little bit easier to see. As I mentioned, we do have like that new referential integrity check. This is the one that I was mentioning before. If you want to validate that the city and state columns sort of match what's in a reference table, you could now do that with the multiple inputs. But in this particular case, I'm going to just specify some preset rules that I already have. Oh, actually, that came from the wrong place. Give me 1 second. And if I can just find my mouse, there we go.
And while you do that, there was, so Yanis on the Glue team had a really good comment that, so if anyone else missed, I just wanted to share, so in Glue Studio, data quality can annotate each record with a pass-fail result and tell you exactly what rules failed for it. And then you can separate good records from bad records and store them in different locations.
Yeah, and that's actually what we're about to demo. So in this case here, the first name is actually, there's a couple of records in here that are less than or equal to 2. And so this should fail. And then we'll be able to see exactly where it is. We also threw a custom SQL in here just for the sake of completeness. But then once you have this, you can come back to the sort of visual editor. So let me just move this. And you have some options, right, within the scan. So I can pass through the original data, right? I can say, I just want to scan an end, or I want to continue, and now I want to process it and then get it into the final destination. I can say I want to fail the job, right, so that it doesn't continue if there's a data quality problem. I can also look at the data quality results, and I can move this data into anything that Glue supports. So as I mentioned, Glue is a data integration platform. So we're showing examples within S3 and within the catalog, but you can dump this into anything that Glue connects to, whether that's a Dynamo database, Redshift. It really doesn't matter. An example of that, I'll just show you how we do it with S3, but you can kind of come here and say, okay, I want to do an S3 target, at which point you'll see this down here for the original data. One thing I didn't check off was, and this is really important, is the add new columns to indicate data quality errors. So this is what's going to give me that row level result. Now, there's a trade-off here, obviously, right? We are now going to be taking a little bit more scans of your data. So if you're worried about performance, you may want to turn it off. Although we found that there hasn't been that much of an uptick, 10, 20%, somewhere around there. It depends on this data. It depends on the shape. There's a lot of it depends. But at the end of the day, once you check this off, if we come here and we look at what the output schema looks like, these are the new columns that Yanis was mentioning. And so you'll see the data quality evaluation result is actually a string that you can filter on. So that'll say pass, fail, and I'll show you that in a second. So let me just show you one that actually ran. So I've got this one. It's the exact same thing. The only thing is that it's serializing both to S3, and which I also have cataloged. I have this new data quality tab here within the Glue Studio authoring experience. And this is where I can see how my jobs are running. I get the overall view. I can see everything that I saw in the catalog experience here. And now if I want to go and look at the more in-depth row by row data, so as mentioned, I already have serialized this down to a table that's in a catalog. I can run this. And what this is doing is this is basically querying the data set and actually doing that filter on data quality evaluation result. So this is actually the raw data. And if we come over here, and we're seeing all of the records right now that failed. So this is the actual question that you had. So I could have, in that visual editor, I could move one set of data one way. I could put a filter now after this step and say, split this, and you know what, good data goes here, bad data goes there, just by filtering on that particular field. In this case, I see that these records fail. So what else do I get? Okay. The most important thing is data quality rules fail. So now I can see in this particular column length field, column length rule type, The first name was supposed to be greater than 2, and in this record, it is not. And if I come over to the left and I look at the first names over here, you see that we have a series of records that are this way. Additionally, we do skip certain rules, right? As mentioned, row count, for example, we can't tell you which rule actually broke row count. So we don't actually specify that. Also, custom SQL is not yet supported for row level results, although we are working towards that beyond our initial release this week. So that's the extent of the demo. So hopefully that illustrates a little bit about the flexibility. Again, it's within Glue. So anything you author here, if you've never seen this, these are actually scripts that get generated out of the visual. So this is actually the Glue code. We have customers who are parameterizing this. The DQDL itself is actually stored within here. And so you could parameterize, you can make it available, anything that can trigger a Glue job, which is pretty much anything in Amazon or in AWS. You can trigger off, get your scans up front, get your results, your pipelines to have these scans in place.
So if I'm understanding this right, you can add things to the visual tab and then it'll generate a script for you?
Yeah, that's actually what Glue Studio is. It's a visual editor that generates Glue code. So Glue code is a lot of Spark code, but it's also there's a lot of functions that we make available. And so we have these all documented. There's a series of both blog posts and documentation and things like that we can make available. But these are all documented features. But if you don't want to read through the documentation, you want a really easy way to craft. This is the editing experience, right? We want to make it really easy for you to craft both the Glue script as well as the DQDL itself.
Yeah, that's so great. I feel like it speaks to kind of what you were talking about at the beginning around different types of customers who might have different skill sets or ways they want to be spending their time, and kind of giving this type of interface as a way to just okay, let me just click through this GUI and create it, and then it just generates the code for you. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've got a question. Solutions architect, so I am always hearing from customers about wanting some best practices and how we can really help them be able to best utilize Glue with respect to their entire data engineering workflow. So what advice do you have for really of course, beyond just data engineers or whoever is going to be using Glue?
Yeah, I mean, so in terms of best practices, it's really about defining what your expectations are, and then sort of putting it all together. One of the biggest things you have to kind of consider is how much of my data am I scanning? So we do support data at rest. You can schedule these scans to run periodically. However, if you already have ETL pipelines, right, this is a perfect place to inject your scan so that you can you already have the existing flows. You might as well not sort of reintroduce anything new. And so you may want to think, though, the reason why that's kind of important is as you're doing the ETL pipelines, that's usually operating more incrementally. You may not be doing entire data sets at once. And so it's really about making sure that you're only taking passes of the data that you need to take passes of the data, right? Optimize for lowering your compute and your costs, which is really sort of obvious, I suppose. But that's where customers probably should be thinking about how to set up their pipelines and how to actually configure these to run and when.
Cool.
Yeah, super cool.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that demo with us, chatting with us today. It was great.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. And we're really excited. So hopefully people try out the blog posts, try the getting started, take a look at the documentation, give us some feedback. We're really excited to have people actually using the product. We believe now that you can do end-to-end sort of use cases with this, and that's why it's been made generally available this week.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for showing this to us.
Yeah.
Yes, and I hope to hear more about. Well, we're about to hear more about Glue right after this, so we've got more Glue coming up.